Hello, my friends. Today I am not able to be with you due to training, so I wanted to share with you a class video on operant conditioning. We already talked about classical conditioning. Now we're moving through the next type of behaviorism called operant conditioning. You'll often find that these types of conditioning are used, sometimes they're used separately, sometimes they're used together, but I want to go over operant conditioning separately here. All right, as always, our vision, mission, and Class Connect Fab 4. And the question today is, what will we be able to do? Today, we will be able to understand how learning takes place and distinguish between two different theories of learning and see a modern day application of learning. So we're going to be focusing on these three here. And as Sheldon Cooper wants to point out, let's just assume everything we've done up till now is wrong. We're going to look at conditioning with new eyes so that we can see the difference. All right, and hopefully you could take a moment and look at these questions and remember Ivan Pavlov and how he used classical conditioning with the dogs. He was able to train the dogs to salivate at the sound of the bell. John Watson used classical conditioning. He unfortunately conditioned a child to be afraid of a white rat at the sound of a loud noise, and so transfer that fear from the loud noise to the fear of a rat. And then Mary Covert Jones actually quite successfully used it with a little boy named Peter who was terrified of rabbits to help desensitize him towards the fear of rabbits and help him to associate rabbits with his love for candy, so to have a love for both. I have a number of links in this class, and in the description of this class, as well as other places, I'll be putting the slides. So if you want to watch this video, but it's important to understand the difference between classical versus operant conditioning. And I know I have a quiz and a video on the OHS as well. So the thing we really want to consider between classical conditioning and operant conditioning is that classical conditioning is essentially associating one negative or one positive with something that is neutral. So whatever you have is an unlearned reaction to something. For example, if you're afraid of a dog and when a dog barks loudly, you jump and you're scared, associating that negative. Maybe let's say that you have a problem where, I don't know, I'm just going to go a little crazy here. You eat too much ice cream. And so you associate that fear of the dog, I don't know if you want to do it like this, but with the fear of the ice cream to maybe so that you don't eat the ice cream and you don't go crazy and take better care of yourself. Remember, a neutral stimulus is always applied even if the person does not react. So you would always hear that barking dog when you saw the ice cream, even if you didn't react to that barking dog that particular time. Operant condition, on the other hand, is where you have a consequence based on your behavior. So the action or the stimulus is only applied if you show the behavior. So for example, let's say that we're going to use that barking dog to discourage you from eating ice cream. Okay, don't cry, it's just an example. So if you say, I'm not going to have any ice cream today, well, we're not going to use the barking dog because you're decreasing your frequency. But under classical conditioning, we would always pair the two no matter what to reinforce that transition from what you already have an unlearned reaction to that neutral stimulus. And here's just an interesting thought. We have Sheldon always knocking on Penny's door. He knocks, Penny, 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 and she opens the door, which makes him encouraged to knock again. So I was just thinking, what kind of conditioning is that? And I would answer that it is operant conditioning because he's doing this and she's repeating the behavior he desires. All right, so what is operant conditioning? Well, operant conditioning deals with something called operants, which are intentional actions that have an effect on the surrounding environment. So your not unlearned reactions, but your reactions that you have intentionally applied. And Boris Frederick Skinner, or BF as I like to call him, not necessarily our best friend, but you could think of him that way. He was a leader in this field, studying behavior before it was cool. And he said that operant conditioning is a learning process in which the consequences that follow your response determine whether your behavior is likely to be repeated. So if you have a response that, or a consequence that you like, you're going to increase the frequency. If you have a consequence you dislike, you're going to decrease the frequency. And I'd like to take a moment here to show you the Cycle 2, Week 1B, Ticket Out the Door, Classical Conditioning password. That's your mastery activity. And the password is Pavlov, which should be lowercase. So I apologize that it's uppercase there. It should be lowercase. All right, again, another link that you might like to watch. This is a scene from the show The Big Bang Theory, and it shows how Sheldon uses operant conditioning on Penny and then later on Leonard to increase or decrease their behaviors. All right, so let's remember a few things about learning with conditioning. Remember the idea of positive in behaviorism. What does that mean? Well, it means you apply a stimulus. And the idea of negative means you withhold a stimulus. Very good. So positive reinforcement, this is how you would increase the behavior you want by giving something good, something that makes the person happy. And if you watch that Big Bang clip, you would know that Sheldon was giving chocolate to Penny to increase her behaviors. Negative reinforcement increases behavior because it takes something bad away. For example, cleaning your room so your parents stop nagging you. Another one, remember when Sheldon wanted Penny to lower her voice? He brought his voice down, got it quieter, and so he was taking that away, taking away that high pitch. And then punishment, decreasing behavior because you give something unwanted. Remember when Leonard got all upset with Sheldon, he squirted him with water and he didn't like that. He wanted to stop his behavior. All right. So let's talk about punishment for a moment, because I will bet right here, this is kind of what comes to mind when I say punishment, right? You know, timeout, yelling or lecturing, removing of something, spanking, or perhaps there's even one that you're thinking about we don't have up here. But I want you to remember that punishment isn't necessarily something like this. Punishment can just be anything that decreases the frequency of the behavior. So for example, if a child is misbehaving and you ignore that child, well, that is a type of punishment. If it's successful and the child begins to decrease their unwanted behavior, then you could continue to do it. That's withholding your attention. All right, very important to keep in mind, if learning is to occur, rewards or punishments must be repeated. I know that sometimes I talk to parents and they say, oh my gosh, I keep doing the same thing and the child just isn't changing. Well, it takes a while sometimes. Sometimes you need what's called a fixed ratio, a number of target responses made before a reward is gained. A great example is Moe's Rockin' Rewards, or I don't know if they still have that anymore, but you earn 1,000 points and you get a $10 credit. You get 10 points for every dollar you spend. That's a fixed ratio. You spend $10, you get, you spend $1, you get 10 points every single time. It never changes. A variable ratio, on the other hand, is where the number of target behaviors for a reward keeps changing. So you never know when you're going to get rewarded. Let me get that. So for example, like when people play slot machines or gambling or they play bingo, you never know, is that the number you're going to need? Is that the time you're going to win? And so it keeps you playing, it keeps you guessing. Sometimes, for example, teaching an animal like a dog a new trick, which reinforcement schedule should you use? You might think you should use fixed ratio, but in actuality, that only gets your dog to come back and do that trick every time for a treat. And if that treat loses interest, the dog's not going to do it. So you actually want to use a variable ratio where the dog never knows, if I do the trick this time, do I get a treat? Or do I have to do it 2 times or maybe 3 times? And so that variable ratio actually hooks people and animals better and gets them coming back. As I mentioned, we have to repeat rewards or punishments for learning to occur. I wonder if she's going somewhere with that. You can also look at it as intervals, how much time passes between the rewards. So for example, with a fixed interval, there is a specific amount of time that passes before a reward comes, like getting paid once a week on Fridays. Every Friday is your fixed interval. But also you might have a variable interval, which is where you never know how much time is going to happen between the actions. So for example, if a teacher calls on you once during class or twice, they might call on you twice in a row. They might call on you at the beginning of class and then again somewhere in the middle. You never know, and it tends to keep you a little more focused. Uh-oh, is she going to call on me? Oh, I guess I better be listening. So quick question, email, Facebook, Instagram, on which schedule do you think social media operates? Is it fixed or is it variable? You never know when that text is going to come in. You never know when that Facebook like or that poke is going to come in. It would be a variable interval. That's why we find social media is very addictive. And here's another question for you. Have you noticed how often my Big Bang Theory memes have shown up? Are they every slide, every 2 slides, or are they on a variable interval? So there's something you can go back and check out. All right, let's talk about school for a moment. Something to consider, because you're doing a project where you have to actually use conditioning and things from Unit 3 to help a student become a better student, is to think about what would be a punishment for you and what would be a reward. So what would motivate you to do well in school? Are you the sort of person who would be motivated by saying, okay, if I study for an hour, I could have dessert afterwards? Or are you better off saying, okay, if I don't get this done by this time period, then I'm going to lose my TV time, or I won't get on Facebook? So you could use rewards and punishment. Think about what you could do to kind of encourage yourself to be a better student or to tell someone else to be a better student. All right, so I wanted you to think about rewards and punishments. And I put here, I think rewards, something that reinforces desired behavior, are better because. So I want you to think about which is better in your opinion in terms of shaping behavior. Is it a reward? Or is it a punishment? Remember, punishment just refers to something that decreases undesired behavior. It doesn't necessarily mean a spanking or a timeout or something like that. And I do have a video here that I thought you might like to check out. And again, you can get my download the slides that I have in the description for this video, and you'll be able to click on any of these links. All right. So it's important to consider using things like operant conditioning to make yourself a better student. Maybe you're struggling right now to stay on track. Operant conditioning might be a way to help yourself get back on track. So what kind of rewards could you give yourself to increase the behavior you want if you wanted to be a good student, for example? And what kind of punishment could you use to decrease the behaviors you don't want? And here is your Mastery Cycle 2 Week 1B Ticket Out the Door slide about classical conditioning. And I want you to consider in classical conditioning the difference between the unconditioned and conditioned response. So remember, the unconditioned response is that unlearned response, something nobody had to teach you. For example, with John Watson and Baby Albert, no one had to teach Baby Albert to be afraid of a loud noise. That was unconditioned. But the conditioned response is what you're taught to be, how you're taught to behave or how you're taught to react. So when Baby Albert saw that white rat, at first he actually wanted to play with it. He thought it was, fun. But over time, by combining that loud noise with the white rat, Baby Albert began to be afraid of that rat. All right, my friends, since it's just you and me today and you were just watching a video, I do have classes over. You would be watching these videos in class, which would have a little bit more time, but it's no joke, class is over. And here's the lovely background to the video in case you need it. There are some more slides if you want to look, like I said, in the slides in the description on the content page. You can get these links, but you can also find some slides to help you practice some information from classical conditioning. Sorry that everything comes out backwards here. And let me know if you have questions, comments, or maybe just the best operant conditioning idea ever. One time my students told me that behaviorism is how we're going to take over the world. So maybe you figured out how you want to do that there, Pinky. All right, my friends, if you have any questions, please let me know. Check this out, check out these videos, and hopefully you too can understand classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and how they differ.